Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 10 of the Natural Female Muscle Podcast. Today on the podcast, we are joined by Rachel Fewkes. Rachel is a care registered nurse and mum of three, whilst also being an incredible figure athlete who actually holds a pro card with the ICN. Most recently, Rachel competed last year, where she actually finished off the season at WNBF Worlds, where we actually had the pleasure of meeting, which was really, really wonderful. But speaking further to Rachel, I found out that she has a really, really incredible background and an amazing introduction to bodybuilding, where she's also overcome and persisted through a lot of significant challenges and adversity. And that's something that I really can't wait to cover. So, Rachel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Laura. That was cool.
No, it's nice. I always like to give everyone an introduction that they deserve, because, you know, you're an incredible athlete, but along with that, you have a lot of other, you know, amazing stuff that you manage in your life that I know a lot of people will really appreciate listening to. I've had a lot of listeners kind of reach out to me, whether they're mums or they have other jobs, and they say, you know, it's really nice to hear from a wide range of people who do different things. So, yeah, you definitely deserve it. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Thanks. Yeah, it's interesting actually. You don't think nursing and bodybuilding would be something that would go together often. Yeah, I work in intensive care. I've been there like 16 years now, but
Wow.
you find I do find a lot of bodybuilders are sometimes nurses. Yeah, I think we're a bit crazy.
Yeah, it's true. I have met a lot of bodybuilders who do that. And I think that we'll probably get into this in a little bit, but I'm sure that with the fact that you have to like manage so much with the changes in shifts and like having to be really resilient with a lot of stuff, it probably transfers quite well into bodybuilding in the sense that it makes you organized and it makes you strong and it makes you more resilient like that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we'll start anyway with kind of like bringing things back to the start, because I know you've come a long way from where you were even before you kind of got into training. So do you want to start by giving us like just a little bit of an introduction to not even what got you to like directly competitive bodybuilding, but just training in the first place and how that became kind of like almost like a safe space for you and how that's actually transformed a little bit over the years as well?
Yeah, for sure. I actually just finished listening to your solo episode this morning as well. So some of what, resonated with me, some of the things that you went through sort of in that 15, 16-year-old
Yeah.
time. Yeah, I think I was the oldest of four actually, but we were always quite a sporty family. I had two younger brothers and a younger sister. We did a lot of sports growing up. It was predominantly sort of netball and athletics. And then we lived in the western part of Australia, so Western Australia, where AFL was a big sport. So then we played that. But I lived in a small country town. I only had a population of about 2,500. So I went to boarding school in year 11 and 12, which was hard, I think, being away from my family and sort of those close friends. And yeah, I sort of started to struggle in those early teenage years with a lot of anxiety and depression. And I think just lacking sort of structure as well. Like boarding school, I didn't have relatives to take me out. And by the time I'd sort of gone there, year 11 and 12, a lot of the girls had made sort of really close friendships, from grade 8. So to come there, then I did find, really quite difficult. I also struggled a lot with my skin, had quite terrible acne, and yeah, I had quite low self-esteem, and sort of some of those things that I'd used to just fill in all my time or was quite good at with sport, wasn't there at that time. But so sort of once I got into uni, then we moved over to Brisbane, my family, and I sort of started uni then. And met some friends who were a bit more into fitness. My best friend, who's dual Canadian, I actually went and visited in Canada when I was over in the States just in November. I hadn't seen her for 5 years. She's like very outdoorsy.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and got back a love of sport. Started sort of umpiring AFL as well, and that's how I met my now husband. But yeah, I think I did start to use exercise as a sort of anxiety management. It's sort of once I started nursing as well, I had a lot of insomnia, and that didn't help. So that's, you know, what I used to feel good. I went running, I went to the gym, I was umpiring AFL, and then actually ended up doing triathlons. And that meant that I was exercising a lot. Actually, I didn't have kids at that stage. I was in my early 20s. I was just studying, so I had a lot of free time. Yeah, got into triathlons for a
Yeah.
while.
Did that pick up quite a lot then, really, as you transitioned over to uni compared to when you were at school, as things got obviously like busier with work and studying and things like that?
Yeah, so I think, you know, as I'd started to develop the love of exercise, I'd been in the gym for a bit. I was kind of like, well, what can I do with this now? And I sort of, I've always been a bit like that. I've always liked a challenge. I've always been quite high achiever. I think anything I've done at school, I've kind of put a lot of pressure on myself to achieve well. Dad was always a high achiever. He sort of helped with my homework, and and I did quite well, but I did from an early age put that pressure on. And I guess as you're older, you see the benefits of that. But I think it sort of also led to this sense of perfectionism, overachieving, very analytical of everything, very self-critical as well. Would never take a rest. It was kind of just like push, push, push. Yeah, and yeah, so I probably had an over reliance on exercise. I think I didn't ever allow myself to just chill, and I think that tipped the balance sort of as well with sleep. It's interesting, but I think when you don't allow yourself to rest and calm, then it's very difficult to allow your body to rest at night tired as well. It's kind of that wired but tired mentality. But at the same time, the exercise, it helped me challenge. It gave me focus in life. It created those endorphins, friendships, and real sense of identity, like as well. I enjoyed pushing myself. I think I enjoyed people, the self-validation, the validation that I got from people as well for, wow, you look so fit, as well. But it's becomes a balancing act, and I think in those early years especially, it can be hard to sort of maintain the balance, or the or external things, I think, sort of are constantly create self-doubt and things as well. But yeah, certainly exercise and sport was a huge part of growing up, and ultimately how I sort of ended up in bodybuilding. But
did you find that a lot of things kind of were increasing like your initial years as you like started working in like as a nurse, and the fluctuating hours, was that one of the main things that contributed to like the insomnia and things like that at that time?
Yeah, sure did. First in the initially, sort of when you're full time, I suppose. I mean, we did night duties every 6 weeks initially, but even outside of that, I did start to struggle with sleep. And definitely that first year from nursing was like an almost a turning point, where insomnia became a severe problem, to the point where I was sort of started taking medication for it, Ambien or Stilnox. I started taking that, and then had developed a bit of a dependence on it, and had to seek some help, actually. Even I sort of confided in some doctors at work, that I was having a lot of trouble then getting off it. I would be awake till 2:30 in the morning, and then have to get up at like 5:30 to try and start a shift at 7. So that had significant effects on my mental health as well. And then if I hadn't slept well, trying to decide whether to go up and train still anyway, if it was an off day, and most of the time I did. So I was really sort of pushing the body at a point where there was not a lot of rest.
Because like you say, it was something that helped you to cope and manage a lot of things. But how did you end up turning that into something that was positive or shifting it away from that negative kind of like dependent side, because it was ultimately helping you in a sense. And even though I think you can look back and with anything, you know, relationships with whatever it is can shift from positive to negative, but maybe they're still helping you in some way. How did you start to find that actually started to shift into a positive relationship with fitness, with food, with managing things? I know you actually mentioned to me that I think it was after your first pregnancy that you actually struggled more significantly after, wasn't it? So do you want to roll through how things actually transitioned from there?
Yeah, kind of fell pregnant, not, you know, unplanned, but also happened quite quickly as well. I was only quite 26, and up until that point, had still been doing triathlons quite a lot, was still suffering with quite a lot of anxiety and self-doubt. I had my husband, who was, you know, a brilliant support, but that was sort of affecting our relationship as well. But so fell pregnant with Jacob, and initially like pregnancy was fine. I kept really active. I think that I put myself on a pedestal for that too. It was something else. It was like, oh, you know, you don't have to let pregnancy hold you back, and you don't need to slow down, and you know, all this thing. I think I was actually at the gym the night before he was born because I was a bit antsy and couldn't sit down. Yeah, and that was why. Little did I know, but so it was kind of then, you know, I had a baby who wouldn't sleep, exacerbate the sleep deprivation even more. And then suddenly you've got a child, you don't know what to do. And that perfectionist person in me came out even more about, oh, I'm only supposed to feed them every 3 to 4 hours, and the book says to do this, and no, I can't, you know, do that. I can't, you know, rock him to sleep. I've got to let him cry it out. And oh man, it was
I can imagine. It's
a really difficult time. Anytime I could get him down to sleep, I'd be like straight out the back with Brent, you know, can you do some boxing with me? Or I put him in a swing, and as soon as he was asleep, I'd be trying to exercise. And it wasn't sort of a body image thing. I was quite thin actually. I hadn't put on a lot of weight in pregnancy, and it was anxiety management, and it was just, I think, fear of losing my identity. I didn't know who I was if I wasn't training. I found it really difficult to shift into that mum role straight away. It didn't come naturally, even though, you know, as a young girl, I'd wanted lots of kids. I thought 4 was brilliant. I loved that I had a sister. I loved that, you know, I had brothers. I like big families. But it was just at that point in time, I think I was not settled within myself as a person. And so but at the same time, it was also probably one of the best things to happen to me, because I did have to stop focusing so internally all the time. It was, I had to give now, you know, somebody else relied on me, and actually also just that special relationship, you know, watching somebody grow. So, you know, it's always, things happen for a reason. And I did get back into triathlons. I think I competed in my first half Ironman when Jacob was about 9 months old.
Oh, wow.
I remember I would take him in the pram and push him for runs. I'd go to early morning trainings and come home and continue to do that.
I think it's nice though that you said how, you know, ultimately it did take you a little bit of time to find the balance with a lot of things, from being a new mum to then, I'm sure, also then like transitioning back into work, and then also trying to be yourself outside of work and do a lot of your gym things. Because I think it's very easy to look at a lot of people, and I actually feel like this a lot when I look at a lot of mums, and I think they've just got everything like together, and like you almost like get the fear that like, how am I ever going to be able to kind of do that? But I think that it's normal to know that like the initial stages, like sometimes it's a big change like in your life to have to deal with a lot of different things. And I suppose it just maybe takes a little bit of time to find where the balance kind of sits well for you, and for kind of figuring out what works well, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. I was very young too. both, you know, maturely and aged,
Mm.
I suppose, as well. Yeah, don't rush into it, but um,
But you learn from everything at the end of the day, and like you say, you know, no matter what you kind of look back at, you can always
yeah,
take something away from it that transitions into something positive that you learn in the future. Um,
yeah,
how did that actually eventually? So at that point, like you said, you were still actually doing triathlons. How long were you
yeah.
actually doing your triathlons for?
Um, so then I had my second child. He came just over 2 years later,
Mm-hmm.
Hayden. So I think it was about at that point where I realized I could not maintain trying to train, you know, all three
Yeah.
disciplines, swimming, running, and I just went to running. Um, Maybe back into the gym a little bit too, just because it was a bit more convenient. But I know then I sort of set my mind on achieving my first marathon, as you do. Okay, I can't do all three anymore. I'll just focus on running and we'll set that as a goal. So yeah, I did. I sort of went back to work like just part time, and of course, and you know, with the two kids, and was definitely much more settled second time round. You know, it's adjusted a bit more to mum life, and
Yeah.
you know, was enjoying the kids, and you know, found a newfound love of this additional identity now, you know, motherhood. But in terms of exercise, I think that probably was a transition where I dropped off a lot of exercise compared to, you know, previously. And mostly became a runner. And but you know, again, it's just like it's always been with me. Just I like to have something that I focus on, a challenge. Yeah, and so I think that's what it was. I just took the running. I never really liked swimming before anyway, so
Fix the one.
yeah, and riding usually took too long. We didn't have time, and it's really
Yeah.
hard, you know, with the kids. You know, it wasn't always fun to go cycling on your own. Um,
Yeah,
yep.
it's true.
So
It's quite time consuming as well. I'd never really kind of thought about it like that. Whereas I suppose in comparison, training for a bodybuilding side of things, when you've been used to triathlon training and doing stuff like that, it's maybe not as time consuming, like when you look at it from that perspective.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the squad that I had trained with was like the other side of town. I was traveling a lot, early mornings to get, you know, I'd be traveling 30, 40 minutes to get to where I was training, sometimes for a 5:15 start. So yeah, it just wasn't going to happen anymore. I'd got better on top of the sleep too. I think I'd started seeing a counselor as well, who like was a friend of mine. I'd had periods where I'd sort of used a mental health plan through a psychologist as well. Started to develop you know, a lot more coping strategies with the anxiety, journaling, and then probably more recently meditation. But my
Mm.
boys, once they started going through kindy, I met a lady who was a friend, but then she was a counselor, and yeah, sort of talked to her, did a bit of neuro linguistic programming, sort of going back, sort of looking where a lot of these perfectionist traits and self-limiting beliefs and things stemmed from. And yeah, I think it was probably around that time that I did start to develop a lot more healthier coping strategies with the anxiety and things as well. Yeah, so yeah,
Did that
I
start to
think running and
transition? Sorry, go on.
yeah,
I was just going to say
running, and I
that
think
starts to transition into like a bit more of a then the healthier, like not necessarily healthier, but obviously the different relationship when it came to training and how that obviously led you into bodybuilding from there a little bit.
yeah, yeah, I think probably, you know, at that time, then maybe my focus started with food. I'd quite enjoyed then with being at home, sort of in the kitchen. I think it was probably an era of going around like paleo and the Thermomix. I think I got a Thermomix not long after my second child was born. I think I got quite obsessive there with that, and some of those things sort of took where, you know, what I could control, I guess. Had this, you know, focus on clean eating, I dropped off a lot of sort of grains, and yeah, was mostly fruit and veggies and meat and nuts and seeds, all clean eating for a while there. That was, yeah, probably I put in to some focus. But the bodybuilding came along. I, I think I probably saw it was at my local gym at the time then, and I'd always had a relatively athletic physique. My mum does too. She'd sort of been a runner at a young age. I've played a lot of sports and things, not so much in the gym, but was quite a muscly woman, I suppose. Had this athletic physique, and it's sort of been noticed to a point. And I do remember even sort of training at the gym, and big Zeta, I don't know what was her background, but this really tall blonde lady with really deep voice, telling me that I'd be good bodybuilder. And at that stage, my thoughts around bodybuilding was that it was like Arnie, the enhanced steroids kind of days. And I think she probably was enhanced, her and her partner, but I wasn't sort of interested. But I do remember, quite a ways back, sort of people noticing that I seemed to be quite muscular. I always was quite lean as well. But it wasn't until so after I had my third child, then that was 3 years later, I tried to get back into team sports and play some football that I'd played when I was younger, and then had umpired growing up when I was at uni and met my husband. But tried to play in the women's team, wanted to get in a team environment, and then ruptured my ACL in the third game. So put an end to that, and ended up back in the gym. And we have these classes over here, all these franchises called F45 that are like circuit-based places that you go and get taken through, and they often run challenges. So 2018, I think I competed in a challenge, and I'd had my third child, and I won that. I think I lost about 5 kilos or something. I don't know, in the 8 weeks, can't remember. But I kind of got noticed, and one of the trainers there had been competing in like the bikini categories, and I'd started that year for some reason seeing a bit more of the natural bodybuilding, and I still didn't think it was for me, more because I'm a bit like you, I'm real tomboy, like a lot of dresses, the heels, makeup and hair. I only got done sort of wedding day. I don't do it very much. But a little thing in my ear was sort of like, oh, maybe I should have a look. So I asked one of the trainers, if I was to do it, who was your coach? Who should I do it? And she said, oh, my ex-boyfriend, there's no one else. He's the best. He'd coached me, and that happened to be Joey Cantlin, who's quite well known in Australia anyway, in the natural bodybuilding. I think overseas as well. He's done a lot of work with ICN India. He's got a very close relationship with WNBF. And he happened to be really local to me, so it was amazing. I started 2019 January. I went and sent him an email, said, can I come and have a chat? And then it went from there. I still hadn't committed that I would compete. But yeah, I probably, in my head, once somebody sort of put something, I'm not one to turn it down or back off from a challenge. So that's how it started.
Was it something that felt maybe like a little bit daunting at first when you sort of like reached out to him and you were a little uncertain, or how did that kind of feel for you at that point?
Yeah, I think the only thing that was daunting certainly wasn't the training or the nutrition. Not that I had a lot of idea of, how that would differ, but the stage, the heels, the being in the spotlight, and the posing, just I can't dance even. That was a real. And so I think initially then when I saw the sport category and the girls in the sneakers, I thought that's probably where I'll be. That, I figured that's how I sort of saw myself, I think, was as that athletic physique. That's and then I still just, it was like, I can't move like that. It just doesn't feel natural. And then Joey has, started to realize, you've got a lot of muscle actually. And um, we committed without sort of committing to which division. And then I went and saw a lady who actually had made my bikini and was a previous Australian title holder for bodybuilding. Her name was Jo Rogers. And Joey wanted her opinion on whether I was big enough for figure, and turned out she said I've got the biggest lats she'd seen for a long time, and that I'd go with figure. And so then that felt better to me, seeing the muscularity kind of posing.
Yeah.
I just had to then get used to heels, so I got the shortest pair of heels that I could. And as I leaned up, and I look back now, I think bodybuilding's coming so far. I think I could still probably compete in fitness and sport, and I have.
Yeah, they're definitely just developing more and more and more, I think, the classes. Was that prep though? Because obviously you actually had a lot of muscle by that point, which is, like, say, you had a great athletic background, you've been training for years, which, as a natural athlete, even if you're not directly bodybuilding training, you're going to be building a lot of muscle regardless by the time that you get to that point. So you guys obviously went kind of like straight into the prep, I'm guessing, in 2019. How actually was that? Because I know you'd obviously mentioned that previously you had more like anxious tendencies and, a mixed relationship with food. And that's probably one of the biggest things that a lot of people maybe struggle with a little bit in their first prep. And on top of that, you're also trying to be a mom and work and everything as well. So how did you actually find the experience of that first prep?
Yeah, good and hard. Because it did make me super anxious. I think, I had a quiet confidence that as a first timer, or, just from that external validation, and that, I was probably coming in at a fairly good point. But I just put so much pressure on myself, and the sleep was just still all over the place. So from an early point, I was dieting and training on not great recovery. I remember and can compare now, having done last year's season, which was much better, but that first year I was really inflamed and tired the whole time. I remember my legs being constantly achy. I wouldn't be able to sleep, and I would get into magnesium hot baths would be the only thing that would sort of help my legs and body to stop aching, and to help me sort of go off to sleep. The food thing was okay. I sort of learned to track, Joey is more about flexible dieting, taught me about macros, I think. He will provide meal plans for clients who want them, but he said, give this a go. People tend to prefer it. And I think with the family too, because then you've sort of got whatever's in the cupboard, made those things easier, but also harder in a way as well, because you've got all the food there for the kids that you don't normally eat, and then you're making their meals for them and separate for you. So I was probably, like, I was never 100% compliant, but I've always been, quite perfectionist to a point as well, that it was good enough. Sleep was pretty terrible. The anxiety was quite high. Training was hard, but I've always trained, I think, with intensity, and now I kind of think, oh, do I not train as hard? But I think I recover well now. Whereas then I was just never recovered. I also probably was lifting way too heavy, having not have had a lot of experience with, doing the proper deadlifting, barbell back squatting, that sort of thing. I was doing it without really engaging the right muscles. I did end up a couple of times with some lower back issues. some probably herniations causing some nerve impingements and some sciatica. Did get it actually coming back out of prep, the first prep as well. You live and learn, I suppose. But yeah, I loved it. I loved the routine. I loved the lifestyle. I loved watching my physique grow. I loved how, eating fresh, good food made me feel. I didn't love posing and still don't. And I do it, but, I didn't love it. But yeah.
How did you guys actually because I know you said that obviously recovery wasn't great throughout that prep, and I think that obviously for a lot of people, I think even in the first prep, it's hard to deal with such a change when it comes to being leaner and then maybe also being stressed, especially if you are more of like or you've got a past with like feeling anxious or struggling with sleep. That tends to flare up a little bit in that first prep, and ultimately you're going to see maybe a little bit of a training performance drop off and a recovery drop off. But how specifically were you able to manage that with training and then also work and also being a mum? Did you often train maybe like a little bit less frequently, or how did you manage your training and your routine around that as well?
Yeah. So since I've been in intensive care, we've done 12-hour shifts. And I can't remember at what point, but I'm pretty sure even from 2019, I've just worked 12-hour shifts a week. So just, 0.6 full-time equivalent, having had, got the kids and school and all that to manage as well. So I kind of did 5 days training, 2 days 12-hour shifts. So just basically didn't train on a work day. And then so obviously if I had a night duty, then the next day was my rest day. At that point all the kids were at school. I think 2019. How long ago is that? Yeah. Or if not at kindergarten. So I basically just trained. I often, as part of the insomnia and the anxiety, is even if I couldn't sleep at night, I always woke really early, really anxious. So for a lot of time I trained early mornings, which is probably not great because I was never probably well fueled. And I would often notice, afternoon trainings, I would not feel like going because I was so anxious, but I'd probably had a couple of coffees and a few decent meals, and I'd usually train better on a weekend or, so training probably wasn't optimal all the time, but that's how I did. But I always put pressure on myself. Very rarely did I miss the training. I know a few hard days. I did leave the gym. I just was, sort of close to tears or just had nothing, and recognized, I've just had no sleep. I can't get through today. I think I probably kept a lot to my chest more than Joey probably realized. Because I was such a perfectionist. I was not a quitter. I just kept pushing through, and it suffered with sleep issues and anxiety for as long as I could remember. So it wasn't anything new, and the nerves for feelings of triathlons and all that sort of stuff as well. So I think you end up becoming adapted to it and used to it, and in a way, addicted to it.
Yeah, it's a really common trait of people that I see who've been like previous athletes or have been used to very, very high workloads as an athlete, is like they won't admit, especially to coaches, when they're feeling like really, really rotten in a prep. And it's obviously a great thing because it shows that you're willing to be pushed, but it's such a hard balance to find when it comes to bodybuilding, and you realize that being super, super, super tired all the time isn't actually always a good thing from a bodybuilding side of things. And being able to actually be honest about those things sometimes is only something that actually helps you to like feel better and look better and perform better and stuff. And is that something that you've just kind of tried to get a little bit better at opening up about over the years? I'm sure your prep last year was probably a lot different, which we'll come on to, but has that been something that's kind of like improved generally?
Yeah, for sure. I took the steps, I think, from then on to get really on top of the anxiety, I made it a priority. I found the things that worked, starting my day with a morning walk, journaling. If I didn't feel like writing things in my head, I had this copy of Jay Shetty's Think Like a Monk. And I would just write sections out of it. And just the writing itself was meditative. Starting the morning, like seeing the sunrise, just made my mood so much better. It gave some non-negotiables about, how to look after myself as well. So that's definitely helped. I'm definitely more open with Joey, and now, and probably I know during my last prep we did do 5 days, but I think even in my previous off season I dropped it back down to 4 days training a week, which I am now too. Just need a complete day of rest. I think a bit more advanced as well. We can get away with a bit lower volume. And I understand now so much more about, how to train, properly and the need for rest and, the intensity with exercises. I just thought volume previously was, what you needed. And, so that's been good. I'm been in a much better place this time around. I think just matured and aged and stuff from there as well.
That's amazing. How did you actually, obviously, like, I know you said things have come on a lot since that 2019 season, but how actually were the shows in the end? Because I know that was maybe the part that you were also like excited for the challenge, but wasn't your most natural state to like get on the stage and be in that environment. So how actually was that experience in itself, and how did you feel coming away from that as well?
It was mixed emotions. I literally was awake from midnight the night before, and I started to panic that I was, gonna faint on stage or wobble over. Like I really even got myself worked up. But then on the day, I know the first time I went out, I was so shaky, but I think I realized everyone was. I think backstage as well, I realized that everybody else was in the same boat, and had that quiet confidence as well in a way. I think I've never been able to look and compare that I, feel like I'm better than anybody else. I think it was just really external validation. And I guess I'd watched my physique change as I'd prepped as well. So I think that helped. But I do remember going out as first timers, that, with your symmetry posing in the rounds, that, you're supposed to look straight on, so when you side on, and I was looking straight out at the audience when I was supposed to be looking side on. And Jason Woodford, the ICN president, was like, he'd known me from having gone to the posing classes, and he was sort of whispering, Rach, and giving me these signals to turn my head. And I think a lot of the time, even with the anxiety, it's like I never had full panic attacks or anything. I've often used humor or dancing or whatever to hide it, and I just talk, which has often been a big thing that's helped, me over the years with the mental health journey as well. Is I just talk. So backstage, I would talk to everyone. I would be dancing to the music, and that was my nerves. Everybody else kind of shut down. So so I remember legs shaking, looking the wrong way, but then to get that, first timers first place, just sort of over the moon. I can kind of picture it now. I get a bit of goosebumps when I got the trophy and sort of holding it up, and it was amazing. I think sort of after that, seeing my family there and winning that, like those feelings are just incredible. Makes it all worth it. But I think even the show day, my hair, like, it hates hairspray. It felt flat and sticky, and my makeup and the tan, and we used Dream Tan there. We're still allowed it in Queensland. So that was slathered over me. And then, trying to do push-ups, and you've got this like gemstone bikini riding up your crack, and you're in heels, and I was just like, this is shit's just bizarre. Like I still remember thinking, I still don't know how I feel about this. I'm so bloody tired, I'm so hungry, and what am I doing? But wow, it's amazing. And yeah, everything all at once.
Was that the only show
Amazing.
you did that year, or did you do a couple of shows?
No, so then I did the next one. I think it was the week later, which was at that time the WNBF equivalent in Australia was called the AWNBS. So it was
Yeah.
women's only, Australian Women's Natural Body Sculpting. And that was run by some a local couple here, just at like one of our local RSLs. And Joey actually was MC. And so I competed there, and some of the same girls were there, some were different, but I loved that show. I had an amazing day. So much less nerves. I'd sort of already peaked. I knew what to expect. I knew how I did or didn't want to try my hair. Was so much happier and so much more relaxed. And again, this just quiet confidence, because I'd won first timers, I'd won novice, and I'd won my weight division, I think, and then had got second at the first show to the lady who went on to win the overalls. So yeah, I came in there feeling, quietly confident, but also just like really wanting to enjoy it. And Joey was MC, and that show was just beautiful, in that they would interview you after every win. And they actually got my boys up on stage, when I'd won the overall there, in fit body. Yeah, so that was really special too. My middle son's very sensitive soul, is my biggest supporter. I could hear him out in the crowd, especially at that one, because the theatre was a bit smaller. So yeah, did that show, and then 2 weeks later, nationals was in Sydney. So I flew down with another competitor of Joey's. We'd stayed down there together. And there I got 3 third placings and 1 fifth placing. So I always placed better in the muscular divisions, or as you probably know it as fit body, as opposed to figure. I think my lower body just not as big, and my hamstrings probably not as well developed. So we focused on that over the last few years. So didn't tend to place as well there. And at nationals, they were seemed to be favouring a bit more of a fuller feminine look, especially in those figure divisions. So it's good. I like that they have a bit more of a clear distinction there. But yeah, I was pretty stoked to get 3 third placings at nationals in my first year.
It's nice to see how your sort of thoughts towards the process even just transitioned across that season, from the first show being like really, really nervous. And I think that having that nice experience that you did for the second show, like, had obviously then like a bit of a change in terms of how you felt about things. And often sometimes just doing like even the one show where you feel really comfortable, and having like your coach there and like just feeling really happy with the process kind of helps you to feel more comfortable with everything as a whole. Did you find that that was kind of like a nice little turning point, and you being like, you know what, I actually really enjoy this?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I really enjoyed it. That was kind of the show too, where I'm like a lot of the girls there, it was just such a friendly vibe, and I kept in touch with so many of those ladies, and still do now, and we cheer each other on now, and have competed in some of the same shows since. And yeah, so I found that definitely out of that show, this love of the team cult, camaraderie, and women bringing each other up. And I guess what I'd started to really love about bodybuilding was just seeing women wanting to get strong. It wasn't about, I know we diet, but it was never about it was always, we always wanted to be big. It was like who could get the most jacked. It was this change, and it was something about the women there that it's in the figure division. I think you get that too. They were often a little bit older, more my age, in their 30s, a bit more life experience, and the reasons for competing were just because they loved a challenge, and they loved training. So I felt that more. It was less about the makeup and the show and who performed best on stage. I suppose it was just giving something to yourself. And I felt beautiful that day too, which I hadn't always felt. Some of the photos, I remember I was messaging to my sister and saying, oh, I'm beautiful, and she's like, yeah, you are, and it was but most of that came from this real natural happy glow too that I could see in the photos. So that did, hence why still in bodybuilding. You love parts of it, hate parts of it, but ultimately most of it I love.
Did you feel like quite a nice, almost like proud transition, like by the end of that season? I think, especially when I hear what you're saying then about seeing like the other athletes as well, and actually finding people who you gel well with and you can understand, makes you see things a little bit differently as well, and like even see the losses maybe a little bit differently, because you can see the other athletes and you can see that everyone's just there trying to kind of be their best, and it helps you to put into perspective, even when you've lost, you have that appreciation for at least the other women that you're kind of on stage with, and all just kind of supporting each other. Because I think there's a lot of perception that a lot of females are always kind of battling against each other, and that we kind of don't like each other, especially when it comes to competitive bodybuilding. And did you kind of find that like meeting other people and just being able to reflect a little bit more on yourself just helped you to have a bit more of a positive perception of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Just made me think of a story from my most recent season. Was it the second show? Or nationals? Can't even remember. I think it was nationals. Yeah. And so so Nikki Simpson, who took out the overalls at for figure division in Queensland that year, I hadn't had, that was the first time I'd met Nikki. She hadn't competed for like 7 years. So she's quite a quiet and lady, and us, I think her nerves kind of made her more introverted, whereas I was kind of like chat to everyone. But my shoe broke right before going on stage. My heel strap had come broken, and do you think I was the sort of person to have a second pair of shoes? No. And I had super glue though, actually, but it was, we were supposed to be going right on, and I suddenly realized, oh my god, my shoe is broken. And Nikki had a pair of shoes, so here was she in the middle of her pump up, and we've been going against each other, and she ran out and got her spare pair of shoes, which had no strap on the back, so I didn't feel great in them, but they at least fit, and she did that for me. And then funnily enough, after that, her shoe broke, and I fixed it with super glue. And then all of these ladies had heard our stories about shoes, and suddenly there's shoes going left and right everywhere, with everybody trying to help each other out, make sure we got shoes. I know someone got my partner to go back to the car to get their other pair of heels. But Nikki and I are very good friends now too, actually. But just things like that. You're always looking out for each other. And it's funny because like I don't have a huge presence on social media. I try not to spend too much time on there, and they're not the close friends that you spend the time with, but you do still feel a real connection with people that you meet over Instagram when they're in the same sort of world as you when it comes to bodybuilding, and yeah, definitely with the girls it's been, and I haven't done IFBB, I haven't sort of done some of the other type of federations, but I do love that about figure, is that yeah, the women are all about, they're cheering each other on, whether it's new PBs they've hit in the gym or yeah, things
Yeah,
like
it's really nice to see. And I think, like you just said, you've never really done like many other federations, but I think that with the natural federations, especially, I think there's I mean, I've been to the two different shows, so I can see what the difference is. And I think that there is definitely a lot more of support, because we're all kind of in it for our own challenge, rather than, you know, trying to beat one another or be better than the other or not speak to anyone. And when you actually are just there to enjoy the experience and just be there on the day, and you kind of appreciate that maybe everyone's a little bit nervous and you just have fun, it just allows you to take so much more away from it overall. It's really nice to hear that story
yeah.
about you and Nikki as well.
Yeah.
Was that like, just with this season, obviously we've kind of just skipped over to last year, 2022.
Yeah.
How different was that season to your 2019 season as a whole?
Yeah. So the prep was so much more enjoyable. I quite early on went and saw the doctor and said, look, I'm prepping, my sleep goes, you just wake up at 3:30 in the morning and you're awake and it's pretty rotten. And I got a tablet, metazapine, which at a low dose has a good effect on sleep. And actually it's been, it was great. I slept so much better. Yeah, I think just the expectation, knowing what, you know, that took out a lot of the worry or pressure as well. I think, yeah, I think I don't even really remember feeling like I had any expectation of myself how I would go this year. You know, or you're not a first timer now, you know, not novice, you're only in the open classes. I didn't do a lot of comparison or anything like that. I think I most, you know, stayed in my own game, my own lane. And I, you know, I still had doubts that I'd say to Joey about, you know, no, my legs aren't big enough, or,
Yeah.
you know, I can't pose or things like that. And he's so great. He just, he doesn't let you get, you know, dramatic. He's so good with girls in that way. So it was a much more enjoyable prep. Body coped so much more. I wasn't in the bath at midnight, you know, soaking my weary legs. The weight, you know, came off really well, had no issues. Yeah, it was great. I think by the time I got to nationals, so the first prep, just for numbers comparison, you know, I felt so skinny. I'd get in the bath, I could feel all my bones, and I think I was, you know, low 30 millimeters for 9 sites. We never really did fat, like skin folds, but I just found I didn't feel really lean. I felt I had so much more energy. Certainly I remember the training days, like on low carb days, I was struggling, but compared to the first prep, for sure, you know, so this prep, I think I got down to nearly 20 millimeters over 9 sites. I was probably 5% body fat. But I didn't feel it. I could look in the mirror and still feel like, you know, I've looked back at some photos the other day, and I probably will post them at some stage and go, oh my goodness, how skinny lean I was, you know, but I didn't feel like that. So I think that's a testament to recovery, and mindset, and not being so anxious, because it's amazing how much anxiety drives fatigue. Oh my goodness, like the mental energy that you waste,
It's massive. Yeah.
it's massive.
Yeah.
So much better prep. So after nationals, we were able to reverse diet into worlds. I struggled a little bit, I think, in that I was kind of felt like everyone else was finishing, and I still had. So that was like early October, and worlds was November 19th. So I still had like a month.
Wow.
and I was very lean, you know, and had been dieting from like May. I think it was 21-week prep for the first show, but starting to reverse diet, but I did struggle to kind of maintain that focus a little bit. Or, you know, I remember picking a little bit more at some other foods and stuff like that. But yeah, it was lovely also actually to be able to reverse into that show, getting a little bit more carbs in. And we sort of learned, I think in our up to the first show, I probably spilled a bit. We learnt I'm probably better moderate carb load over a few days, which we like depleted early in the week, and then probably overdid the carbs in the show. I felt quite a bit bloated. I was probably bordering on spilled national, so we were a little bit better, didn't go quite so heavy, and being a little bit leaner.
Yeah.
Again, I could tolerate it. So it was great. Actually the flight over, Joey sort of plans exactly how many hours into the flight, when to eat, how much food to eat. I slept really well on the plane. I had no
Amazing.
issues with the I had no issues with jet lag when I arrived, and was really relaxed going in. So I think like I brought my best look for sure. At Worlds as well. So that was wonderful. And I realized later that it kind of helped kick off that reverse dieting process for me, that a lot of other people, when they just stop and then don't have another show and they can't reverse into a show, you know, struggle so much. Here was I going, oh my gosh, I can't, I'm struggling to focus on, you know, being strict. But, you know, when you had, at least I had that show, it did help me. So
it's a good point, that, because sometimes when you're reversing, even though maybe you're not fully, like you said, you maybe lost focus a little bit, but when you still have that reverse and another show there, it kind of keeps you in on that reverse for a little bit longer, so that then when you finish, you're like, oh, okay, now I'm in a good spot, rather than finishing the show and then trying to reverse and having a lot going on. So there is kind of like the nice thing about having that and having Worlds. And you also got some nice time to kind of switch off whilst you were there too, which was really nice to see as well.
I went to Vegas the day after the show. I'd never been to Vegas before. I went on my own, and just like went and watched the Michael Jackson Cirque du Soleil show, and just walked the strip like all day. I wasn't food focused at all, actually. I was really enjoying just being out on my own, taking in all the sights, and then, like I mentioned, after that, I went and visited my my best friend from my uni days I hadn't seen for 5 years. She'd moved back to Canada just prior to COVID. She's up in the Yukon, a little place called Whitehorse. So I went from blue skies of California to like, minus 15 snow. And it was so wonderful to be able to just snuggle up with her and cups of tea and chats, and even then just having the routine of food like with another family, I think helped me as well. You know, I just ate what they ate when they ate, so I wasn't constantly thinking about food. Although, you know, I was still very lean at that time. I did find, although I wasn't focused on food, if I got too long between food, oh my gosh, I would just got this overwhelming anxiety. We went out to these hot spas, and she was trying to talk to me, and all of a sudden I was just like, oh my gosh, Amy, I've got to get out. I've got to get out. I can't concentrate. I need, you know, I've got to get out and get food. And that happened for a bit longer post show. Is that like if I was out at training or whatever, it'd have been 3 hours or whatever. I'd need to get food in really quickly, or I'd get sort of
it's just the blood sugar at that point gets just so low because you're still so lean. So it's like, even if it's even higher, like your body is still going to get through that like so fast. So it's just making sure you kind of stay on top of it, so that, like you say, you don't like end up with friends and like, I can't actually think. How did you actually feel after the results of that season as well? Because I know you got quite a few seconds in that season, and like, even though you brought an incredible physique and definitely an improved physique, and also just how you felt like a much better athlete too, but still getting those second place results on a few occasions. Like, how did you feel coming away from that at the season, and how has that led you kind of into your thoughts moving ahead as well?
Yeah, I didn't have any expectations going to Worlds how I would do. You never know who's going to be there on the day, and like I said, I'm not big on social media, so I don't follow,
Yeah,
especially internationally. So I was just stoked and shocked to get second place at Worlds, particularly in the figure division, as
that
we
was an
a
amazing.
lot of girls don't tend to do both, whereas we do here in Australia. I think there's only 2 of us out of the 12 girls that did both fit body and figure. So to place second in both, I was stoked. So one, I was just, I think that proved to me that I'd improved my symmetry
Mm.
and was bringing a much more balanced sort of physique. So that sort of validated that. I was really happy about that. Um, but again, I know straight away, like, I was jumping with excitement, but it's always that um like second again, more seconds. And I know because from Australia, having won my open division is an automatic pro card. So I had one pro status at nationals. So I knew, I was stoked with that. But I get home, my son's like, "Where's this? Did you get a sword? Did you get a sword?" Which is what the overall winner. Oh no,
Yeah.
I didn't get sword, buddy, but I got this little tiara. And it was that realization that, oh, I can't win an overall now here. So the second in worlds, it was kind of like, because I wasn't sure with after this season whether I would feel like that was it, like I was, done. Just how lean I was, how much time, how it's hard on the kids as well and my husband, whether I would want to do it again. And it made me kind of smile to myself going, oh, here we go. You're not going to be able to let this go now, are you? Now that you have to come back and try and get your first place somewhere. But an excuse to travel to Worlds is always good. But I think I know there's still more in me. Like the last probably 18 months of training, I've just learnt so much. Yeah, I've been training for years, but in terms of, really good, proper bodybuilding style training, the last 18 months has probably been my best. I miss a little bit of like team kind of sport. A little bit of cardio. I went from like, I had a lot of cardio in my first prep too. And Joey did that because he's like, I know you like it. But I would smash myself in my cardio. Whereas the last prep, we just did literally like steps, 10,000 to 13,000 steps. And so I've now become that typical bodybuilder that's like cardio, no. But to still try and go for a little bit of a run. But yeah, and no, and here I am back, training again, and I'm getting comments, oh, when are you going to compete again? Oh,
Yeah.
it'll be a few years, but I think in the back of my head, I know I will,
Yeah.
because I know I've still got more to give. I know I can achieve a bit more, and not in terms of placings, just in terms of with my training
Yeah.
and getting my potential.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
You're kind of just spending a couple of years and developing that and maybe just seeing how you feel as time kind of passes on.
yeah, so this year I was determined so I backed off training to 4 days. I was like, I'm the sort of person when I go to the gym too, I'm there 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Like I have to warm up this old body. I do lots of warm up sets. Sometimes I chat, sometimes I get distracted. It was using up a lot of time. And last year, not a lot of the other goals got ticked off the house, like the spring cleaning, like, and I wanted a shift in career as well. I had so many fears about doing more study. I'd always felt like I needed to know for sure, about everything, but I had sort of lost the drive to put myself do any more professional development when it came to nursing.
Yeah.
I was listening constantly to podcasts on nutrition. And so I finally took the leap this year and have signed up as with the National Women's Fitness Academy. I'm doing my passion's probably in nutrition, but also certified nutrition advisor course, but also doing my Cert 3 for fitness and be masters in female fitness programming. So
That's
I'm
amazing.
really excited about that. So this year was a year of putting some focus to that, ticking off some goals with the the house things we need to get done around here with concreting and kitchen renos, buying new lounges and things like that, cleaning out all kids' cupboards and spending more time, being able to go to the kids' school events and sporting events.
Yeah,
I also coach under eights football team for my
amazing.
youngest son. So, and then we'll see from there. But I think like straight after Worlds, it was like, go back to Joey, keep in touch with him, let him help you get through. And, having the routine of training is so important. And while I'm loving it and it's close to home and it works well, and, I'll keep doing my gym training. Might do a few fun runs with some friends along the way, but yeah, we'll see.
No, that's awesome. I mean, I'm very confident in the fact that, with how much you said with you developing your own knowledge, it's amazing to hear that you're doing that, but just continuing to doing what you love and seeing that develop, it'll just continue to grow and progress. And then you'll know if you want to get back on stage, when that time kind of falls nicely. And one thing that I actually took away from speaking to Nikki actually was how she just kind of mentioned, there really isn't any rush or any pressure to do, any set years or anything like that. And I think especially when you have a family and like you say, going to those events, being present and doing a lot of that stuff when you have good energy to do so is definitely really, really important as well. Is that kind of a big part of you deciding when you next prep? Like a lot of family life stuff kind of comes into that as well.
Yeah, for sure. It takes a big toll on the family. And yeah, being able to go and see the kids things means a huge amount to me. And yeah, and also just on the mood and having the energy to go and kick a ball with them in the afternoon, and being there on the weekends, going to their sport games. So many times I didn't go to Hayden's cricket games last season because that was when I had to train, or and I think mums, we put probably more pressure on ourselves and think worse of ourselves than the kids even probably notice. I'm sure they're going to ask me again when I'm going to compete, probably before I'm ready. But it does, like, I want to be the best version of myself, and I know putting some time into some other things is much healthier balance for just not even just family life, but for me as well. I think if you could there's you can become too ingrained in it sometimes, I think. And I'm bodybuilder, but I'm also a nurse, and I'm a good nurse too. And those other things you learn so much from them as well. So it's important to with your friendships, things outside of bodybuilding, for sure. Yeah.
No, that's amazing. It's a really nice perspective to kind of hear that. And it's been lovely to even just chat to you today and get a really good kind of insight on your journey, how, that's transitioned so much. Truly is something that's really, really inspiring and really amazing to hear. And it was so wonderful to kind of hear that, especially after I'd seen you at Worlds last year, where I saw you on show day and you were like really chilled and you came over and said hello and you looked incredible on stage. And then, hearing that background from you about how, the first experience you were really nervous getting on stage, and previously, how just everything's transitioned from a mental health side of things, from the way you view training, everything is really amazing. So thank you so much for coming on today and chatting. It's been really lovely to have a chat with you.
Oh, thanks so much for you too. I've yeah, like I said, don't do much social media, but you and AJ are probably my two biggest content followers. And yeah, just having come across your podcast recently, I love that there's one purely for natural female. Yeah, so I love listening to everybody's journeys. You learn so much from other people, and yeah, really proud of how far you've come too. I love yeah, I'm so excited to watch your next prep. And yeah, can't wait to see you get up on stage as a bodybuilder too. I love it. Feels like in the women's bodybuilding category has really died out in Australia, which I think is a bit of a shame. But yeah, when I was listening to your podcast this morning as well, you mentioned Nicole Wilkins, and she was definitely my first inspiration. And to me, she is the epitome of the figure, the figure body. And unfortunately, looking at her now, she probably wouldn't be lean enough.
I know.
And so it concerns me in part, that especially in natural divisions, that it appears that conditioning has become what we hold ourselves to, without the use of PEDs. That's what we can sort of use to so yeah, that does concern me, that the level of conditioning now that we have to. So I'm interested to sort of see with natural female bodybuilding, sort of where it can still go.
Yeah, I think it's definitely transitioning a lot. I know that because I know you guys with like the ICN, especially, like, you figure girls get really, really lean compared to like in the UK, the figure girls, it's like a much softer look. So I know that it transitions a lot, but like you say, because you don't have many people in bodybuilding, that's why maybe a lot of the figure girls are a lot leaner. So I think that it'll just continue to kind of transition and develop, especially as more people kind of spread awareness, and it just continues to kind of grow. For sure, I'm sure it'll only kind of get better from there.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, anyway, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate all those kind words that you said at the end. And like you've just said, listening along to my journey, many people are going to enjoy listening along to your episode as well. So thank you so much for coming on. I know you don't have a massive social presence. I know you said you don't like to go on social media, but if anyone is interested in finding Rachel, her Instagram is rfewkes27, I believe. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much to everybody for listening today. If you have enjoyed the episode, if you can like and subscribe on YouTube and follow and rate us on Spotify, that would be amazing. And I will be back with another episode next week.